Terrific. Hi, everybody.
The floor is yours.
Well, pleasure to be here and looking forward to speaking to you this morning or this afternoon, wherever you may be in the world. But in any case, let's get started. I'm going to talk a little bit about the science and the recent research in longevity and preventing heart disease and cancer and living longer. And then we'll go over some practical application of how to put it into action in your lives. So I'm going to give my attempt to share my screen now, put up the slide. Hold on. I think I got it right there, and play from start. Okay, we're good. I think everybody can see that, can see the slides we're going through today, okay? And then I'll click in and out of the slides so we can just talk, and we'll finish off with about a half an hour of Q&A to make sure everybody gets a full understanding of what we're discussing today. All right, so we're talking here about the fact that in the last decade, nutritional science has made radical advances, even flipped over, and people had to make tremendous changes in the way they think about eating for longevity, health, and disease. And one foundational thing I'm speaking about today is there's not one special diet to prevent and reverse heart disease, and then a different diet to prevent and reverse cancer. It's the same dietary portfolio and the same, symphony of food choices that most effectively prevents heart attacks and strokes, and at the same time, most effectively slows aging and improves immune function and prevents cancer. So it's not a cancer reversal diet and a heart disease diet, they're the same thing. And there's no anti-dementia program or anti-dementia diet, because the same dietary portfolio that's maximally protective against cancer is maximally protective against dementia. And one thing we're trying to achieve here is because we know we can radically extend human lifespan, and we can change the bell-shaped curve from centering around age 80, and we can shift that over so the bell centers around age 100. We can live 20 years longer with excellent nutrition. And as we shift that bell-shaped curve over, the bell narrows. And what I'm saying is right now, the average lifespan may be around 80, but people die at 60, 70, 80, 90, 95. They're scattered all over the place. And it's like a crapshoot. And I'm saying not only can we shift that bell to the right by 20 years, but we can narrow the bell. So most everybody lives between 95 and 105. And we don't see a big scattering of people dying 10 or 15 years longer. And we can we enable the healthy life expectancy that gives us full mental faculties and physical abilities in our later years. And that's what I'm striving for, to make sure that you live longer without any brain shrinkage, without any cognitive impairment, without Parkinson's, without any neurologic disabilities that can make living longer not worth it. So with that as an introduction, let's get started. And we're talking here about the foundational principle of a Nutritarian diet. And I'm saying the word Nutritarian diet means a diet idealized to maximize human longevity and not just contain a high amount of nutrients, but contain the wide diversity of nutrients humans need to push the envelope of human longevity. You can't just eat a lot of kale. Just eat a lot of kale and strawberries and get all those nutrients into you, you're going to live longer. Yeah, maybe. But it's much more effective when we have a lot of different variety of different nutrients and not just pushing up a lot of one or two types, but getting a broad variety as possible without exceeding our need for calories. So leading to this basic health equation, which means how long you're going to live and the quality of your life, is linked to the micronutrient bang per caloric buck. Yeah, of course. But also that micronutrient diversity, getting a wide spectrum of nutrients and making sure that nobody's missing any particular nutrient. Because you can have loads of all these great nutrients, but if you're deficient in iodine, you're deficient in B12, you're deficient in zinc, you're deficient in DHA, there's something you're missing. That one thing you're missing could be your downfall and cause problems. So we want to make sure that you have comprehensive nutritional adequacy, having ideal levels of all the nutrients humans need to maximize human lifespan. And that's what a combination of eating right and also the judicious use of blood tests and the judicious use of supplements to assure we have adequate levels, because some people have needs may vary and the amount of that they take in may have to be adjusted to hit that sweet spot of perfection. So the foundational principle I'm talking about, I want you to remember these 5 words. The most proven methodology to extend human lifespan and slow aging is this: moderate caloric restriction. That's 3 words. Moderate caloric restriction in the context of micronutrient excellence. That's 2 more words, micronutrient excellence. Put together those 5 words and write them down. Let me say it one more time. Moderate caloric restriction in the context of micronutrient excellence. And I'm also saying you can't achieve a healthy body weight. You can't achieve the degree of moderate caloric restriction to stay slim and strong and unless you achieve pretty close to micronutrient adequacy or micronutrient excellence, because micronutrient deficits and eating poor foods makes you into a calorie-consuming monster and drives you into overeating behavior. So nutrient fulfillment is a key factor in making you satisfied with the right amount of calories and preventing overeating. So we're discussing here how with the onset of the processed food movement and people eating more foods that are not grown in their vegetable gardens or in their local habitats, but eating more processed foods, bread, bagels, salad oil, pizza, burgers, things that have bags and boxes and Tang and Twinkies and donuts and whatever people are eating. We could see from the 1960s with the start of the fast food movement and the processed food movement to now, we see obesity and the amount of overweight Americans climbing and continues to climb. And excess body fat is the major killer, not COVID, not cancer, not heart attacks, because excess body fat is the underlying mechanism, most powerful mechanism, increasing risk of death from COVID, increasing risk of death from other infections, increasing risk of death from cancer, increasing risk of death from heart attack. Fat on the body is pathologic. There's no such thing as a healthy overweight person. I know a lot of people think that 70% of our population is overweight, but that's not true. That's because the US government sets the BMI of 25 as the demarcation line between an overweight person and a normal weight person. So the BMI below 25, they're classifying you as normal weight, but all long-lived peoples, centenarian populations, blue zones, in other words, studying people who live healthfully in the long are not people with the BMIs of 23 and 24 and 25. They're actually people with women with a BMI below 21 and males with a BMI of below 22. If we look at the American population and look at those with the BMI below 23, now we have 89% of the population is overweight. Not 70%, but 89%. So almost 90% of our population is overweight. Looking at that 10% of people in America that have a BMI below 23, the majority of those people are sickly. Most of them smoke, or they're alcoholics, or they have some emotional or mental disorders, or they have autoimmune conditions, or digestive disorders, or occult cancers. What I'm saying right now is the vast majority of people in the normal weight category in America, even in Western Europe, represent people who are sickly and who smoke cigarettes or drink alcohol or have some diseases keeping them slim. Because if they were eating like other people eat and they were healthy, they'd become overweight. Because the modern diet, with all the bread and pasta and olive oil and concentrated calories, is so disease-causing and so obesity-agenic. It's so, the modern diet is so easily causes the excess desire for calories and promotes fat storage and resists fat breakdown. The modern diet is so fattening that you have to be sick to be a normal weight. It's only 2.4% of Americans that are a normal weight because they eat better than most and exercise regularly. So we really have to, and so that's why it looks like, so people with this idea of like anti-fat shaming or this movement that fat is good or being overweight is good is all based on juggling and misinterpreting of the literature by studying people that are normal weight that are sick, not studying the 2.4% of Americans that are normal weight because they eat healthy and exercise regularly. It almost looks like being moderately overweight is protective against disease if you look at just longevity studies, because people get sick and get underweight when they're really sick. Okay, but in any case, I'm saying here that fat on the body is abnormal. There's no such thing as fat on the body with early human populations. There's no this degree of fat on the body with primate populations or any wild animals with so much body fat. And fat on the body increases insulin resistance, which means that when you eat a piece of fruit, a bowl of oatmeal, some beans, when you eat something with carbohydrate in it, you have a heightened glycemic response. You have a flood of glucose that rises in the bloodstream higher because your body has a harder time taking the glucose out of the bloodstream. And in doing so, it makes the beta cells in the pancreas produce more insulin. So you have a higher insulin response to any carbohydrate you eat when you're overweight. All overweight people are producing abnormally high amounts of insulin. And insulin is a hormone that not only prevents fat storage, but it promotes cellular replication and growth, promoting cancer. Higher levels of insulin increase angiogenesis producing hormones, and the activating angiogenesis, and of course, you may know the word angiogenesis means the growth of new blood vessels. So cells can replicate and grow. Cancer cells cannot replicate and grow and metastasize and invade without angiogenesis promotion. Without excessive elevation of insulin, cancer is very hard to be generated and maintained in the body. You need high sugar in the bloodstream. You need high insulin to promote angiogenesis. And the fat cells also, because they're naturally hypoxic tissue, they don't get a great blood supply. So they naturally spew out free radicals, reactive oxygen species, ROS, the primary reactive oxygen species produced by the body, and a cascade of inflammatory compounds like cytokines and lipokines. In other words, the fat cells release in pro-inflammatory tissues that promote inflammation and cancer and increase your risk of infection. And those inflammatory compounds also activate aromatase enzymes, which means your body produces more estrogen. So now you have abnormally high circulating levels of estrogen, which increase your risk of breast and prostate cancer and cause a host of diseases like endometriosis and fibroids and all types of prostate enlargement and all types of problems with people because they have because of this increasing body fat. So just to review what I'm saying right now, it's that it's essential for people to get rid of their body fat if they expect to push the envelope of human longevity and live as long as they possibly can. So, people's perception of normal has changed. The average woman in America weighs 160 pounds. The average male weighs 180 pounds. Of course, I'm saying like for the average height woman, 130 is the upper limit of normal, but obviously below 120 is more lifespan favorable. The average 5'10" male, 180, 165 is probably the upper limit of normal, but of course below 160 is probably even more favorable. And people might be thinking, well, what about a person who's more muscular, bigger, and it's not fat, it's just muscle? And the answer is, in most cases, excessively largeness due to muscle and excess bone is also lifespan shortening because people had to overeat and eat excessive amount of animal products or eat to be able to get that large. In other words, the shortest lifespans in North America, the occupations with the shortest lifespan, are linebackers on football teams who are overly muscled, may have extra fat too, but these overly muscled males, these big power lifters, these big strong guys with little pot bellies and big muscles, even though that extra muscle weight also puts stress on their heart, and the cell and ages their cells prematurely, and they're chronically overeating, which keeps their metabolism revved up, and they're trying to maximize performance with being as large as they possibly can, is not maximizing longevity. It's actually shortening their lifespan. To review there at the bottom, I have favorable body weight for a woman who's a BMI below 21, and for a male is below 22, ideally. and a favorable body fat for a woman's below 25% and below 15% for a male. And even that's a little bit permissive. I mean, I'm 67 years old and my body fat's 11%. So I think that even probably below 13 or 14 is probably better for a male, but I'm accepting a little extra, acceptability there, especially for women, because they naturally have more fat than males do. Now, of course, we're looking at this from infection, and obese and being overweight is the biggest risk factor for early death from pneumonia, flu, and other infections, including COVID. So even a few extra pounds, just having when you should weigh 120 pounds and you weigh 125, even that's associated with increased premature death from infection. So we're saying here that we have a dangerous worldwide epidemic, not of infection and COVID and cancer and heart disease, but a dangerous epidemic of the malnourished overweight. Means they eat extra calories, and to gain those extra fat on the body, they're eating low nutrient calories, not high nutrient calories, and the fat then contributes to that malnourished state. Let me explain 1 minute about that. I'm saying that fat cells sequester nutrients. In other words, if I took a glass of carrot juice and I poured it into a quart of water and shook it up, you could see there's still a lot of carrot in there. It's an orange quart of water with carrot juice in it. But if I take that same cup of carrot juice and I pour it into a gallon of water, not a quart, but a whole gallon, and shake it up, it's going to be diluted, so you're not going to see the water is orange. In other words, the nutrient density is diluted by the extra body weight. But what I'm saying here is that fat cells sequester nutrients over and above the amount of space and weight they occupy in the body, especially fat-soluble nutrients. So we suck nutrients into the fat cells away from the cells and the brain and the other areas we need them to prevent us from, to keep ourselves aging slower. So we have so being overweight makes you malnourished and increases your nutrient needs of the body. I always say to people in the big audiences, I say, raise your hand. If somebody's been shot by a bullet, your friends, your family, your neighbors been shot by a bullet, raise your hand. Like one person out of the 700 people raises their hand. I say, raise your hand if you've been stabbed by a knife in your neck or your chest, or, and nobody raises their hand. I say, well, how many people here has a family member or a friend or a neighbor who's got cancer or a heart attack or a stroke? And practically everybody raises their hand. Saying, this is crazy. How could you live in such a dangerous neighborhood? How do you stay living in that neighborhood? How do you live like other Americans live? How do you stay eating the foods other Americans stay? You got to get out of that neighborhood. You got to change things, because we know the danger that's invaded our neighborhood with fast food restaurants and donuts and fried foods and French fries and burgers. We know that we've been eating ourselves to death. In the light of the fact that nutritional science has made such radical advances where people can live longer, our population has moved in the opposite direction. So let me just discuss this metabolism and aging for a minute to make sure you understand that if my body needs, let's say, are 1,500 calories a day, and I eat 1,700 calories a day, an extra 200 calories, my body will not turn those extra 200 calories all into body fat, because it's like 3,500 calories a pound. So 350 days a year approximately. So every 100 calories of excess a day should turn into 10 pounds a year of extra body weight. So if I eat 200 calories extra over and above my basal metabolic needs, that should result in a 20-pound weight gain that year. But it doesn't, because my body resists weight gain as much as it can. It's struggling not to turn all those calories into fat. So what the body will do is it'll rev up its metabolic rate. It'll raise its body temperature. It'll raise the respiratory quotient, the amount of calories burned through breathing. It'll increase its thyroid function. My body will set into motion a series of biological events that'll try to burn off those calories, so I'll only gain 10 pounds, not 20 pounds. My body's fighting for your behalf. But it's a pact with the devil, because increasing your metabolic rate from the extra calories you're consuming is speeding the rate at which you're aging, and aging your telomeres and your stem cells, and usurping and utilizing your natural lifespan and forces prematurely. What I'm saying right now is that when we overshoot calories, we don't just gain weight, we increase our metabolism and increase the rate via which we age. Don't forget, in the bottom half of normal, if you look at the normal level of thyroid function, in the bottom half of normal, you have the longest lifespan, less irregular heartbeats, sudden cardiac death, less heart attacks, half the heart attacks as people in the upper half of normal. Keep in mind when people have hypothyroidism, they're taking medications for their thyroid. Don't overtake it to maximally suppress your TSH. Keep your TSH between 2 and 4. Don't push it down low so you can try to lose weight with thyroid medication. Don't take thyroid medication as a means of thinking it's going to help you lose weight or lower your cholesterol like the anti-aging community gives you, because you're going to be pushing your metabolism and aging faster. We want to age slower, not faster. When we cut back on calories, when we undershoot our calories by a little bit each day, and we go to bed a little touch hungrier many nights, we just overshoot our calories to keep ourselves nice and slim. And when I undershoot calories by 100 calories a night, I'm not going to 100 calories a day on the average. I'm not going to then lose 10 pounds. My body will become very resistant to losing weight. I exercise regularly, and so my body knows I'm utilizing muscles, so it wants to keep those muscles, and it has a certain metabolic set point, which it prefers to live at. And if you exercise regularly and live at that favorable metabolic set point, as you undershoot calories a little bit, you won't keep losing weight. Your body will resist the weight loss by lowering your thyroid function, by lowering your body temperature. Sure, you'll be colder in the winter. Your hands and feet may be colder. You'll be more comfortable in the hot weather. You lose less calories through breathing. You'll lower. In other words, your body sets into motion a series of biological events that slows the rate at which you age. And what I'm saying here, that's the secret to living to be 100 years old, is keeping slim but muscular and strong as we undershoot calories just by a hair. So we're talking here about overeating, which makes our fat cells become metabolically unfavorable. And then the overeating, which is foods that don't contain a lot of nutrients, build up toxins like advanced glycation end products from cooked carbohydrate, like people like the crust of bagels and pizzas and chips and French fries. When you bake things and you toast bread and make it brown, you blacken, you form more of these acrylamides and advanced glycation end products in the body, which age us. The advanced glycation end products, the oxygen species, aldehydes, ammonia, uric acid, urea. There's a lot of toxins that build up in the body when we don't eat healthfully. And when those toxins build up, we feel fatigued all the time. And we have to overeat. We have to keep the calories coming in all the time. We got to become a calorie-consuming monster. We use calories, we become a food addict because we don't feel comfortable with the right amount of calories. You have to overconsume calories to feel okay when your body is not clean, let's say, And oils, of course, are all toxic. There's no such thing as a healthy oil. Which oil is the healthiest oil? Who cares which oil is the healthiest? They're all fattening. I'm making this radical claim right now. I'm saying olive oil causes breast cancer and prostate. How can I make something that was ridiculous as saying a healthy oil like olive oil causes cancer? Because people are overweight. And they're pouring more high-calorie oil on their food. And the average person is using 300 to 500 calories of oil on their food, whether they're cooking it, pouring it on salads. They can't lose weight consuming all those extra oil calories because oil is an appetite stimulant. It rushes into the bloodstream very rapidly. It doesn't lower your appestat or your appetite. So you have that tablespoon of oil on your food, it makes you want to eat more, not want to eat less. And when you cook food in oil and it's fried, especially with fast foods, one of the hallmarks of fast food is that you cook food in oil and they fry things and it forms, the oils degrade and form more toxic carcinogenic compounds. It even causes cancer just to work in a fast food restaurant, even if you don't eat the food. But of course, we're saying here that cooked vegetable oil is probably even more dangerous than eating red meat. But maybe even more dangerous than eating sugar. Of course, sugar in eating sweets is dangerous. And don't forget that white flour equals sugar. When you eat a piece of pizza or a bagel or a croissant or a piece of white bread, you're eating candy. That's candy, that's cake, because the body doesn't differentiate from eating sugar and eating honey and maple syrup or eating candy corn or marshmallows or eating white bread. White bread and marshmallows are the same thing because it still enters the bloodstream as glucose, as concentrated glucose, which coming in too rapidly, stimulating dopamine centers in the brain for you to want to become sweet addicted, increasing your desire to eat more calories, and making you feel chronically ill unless you chronically overeat. I'm saying that if you want to get sick and overweight, then put a lot of sugar, salt, sweeteners, salt, and oil in your food and use white flour. So don't think it's like, benign to have a piece of bread or a bagel or a burger bun or a pizza, because that's junk. It's the cake diet Americans eat. I call it the cake diet. For breakfast, they have a muffin. That's a piece of cake without the icing on it. Or even worse, they have a pancake or a waffle, which is a fried cake, and then they put more sugar on the cake itself. It's the craziest. Or they eat cold cereals, which are like cake, like puffed cereals, like Fruit Loops, and all kinds of other junk with some sweeteners. And then they have lunch, and they have bread and pizza with a burger, or a pizza's cake with cheese on top, or a burger with cake on both sides. And of course, the fast food manufacturers don't just put salt in the bread. They put salt in the French fry batter. They put salt inside the burger meat. They get you salting up everything. So you'd want to drink more soda, and you want to eat more. And salt obviously is a tremendously detrimental substance to shorten human lifespan, but it's also an appetite stimulant. You want to really become overweight, you sweeten salt and oil and use a lot of white flour products. But if you want to achieve an ideal weight and ideal health, you have no choice. You have to take out the sweeteners, the salt, and the oil. You're not going to have a favorable body fat percent with a lot of oil in your diet. It's impossible. And I'm also saying here that digestion, insulin sensitivity, and favorable metabolic rate is enhanced in the morning and through the midsection of the day. And we want to eat earlier in the day, eat a lighter and earlier dinner, and not eat a heavy meal at night. You know how a lot of Europeans eat a big dinner late at 9 o'clock at night and go to bed after a heavy dinner. That does not enhance lifespan. It's digesting food during sleep increases aging. Slower aging means sleeping without having food in your digestive tract. You want to finish eating for the day, maybe by 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock the latest, and give yourself a good 4 hours. And you can't eat that heavy at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock either. You have to eat light enough so digestion can finish before you go to bed at night. So you shouldn't be eating your biggest meal of the day late at night, and you should be trying eating a lighter and earlier dinner and going to bed at a consistent bedtime in a very dark room. Now we know that vegetables are the healthiest food in the world. And vegetable portions per day decreased risk of cardiovascular disease and cancer, restoring elasticity, accelerating reversal of heart disease. We know vegetables are the most protective food against cancer and heart disease, particularly raw vegetables. Because when you cook vegetables, especially green vegetables, green cruciferous vegetables, you deactivate the enzyme. The myrosinase enzyme in green cruciferous vegetables is deactivated. So you're not going to form those beneficial anti-cancer compounds as much. It's so important to eat a salad every day and to chew it really well, to get those raw vegetables into you at least once a day with the full enzyme intact. We're talking about green vegetables with onion or scallion on the salad. So let's kind of review what you've learned so far today. We're saying that the body has the ability to live a lot longer, to slow the aging process, to stop telomeres from aging. And actually, I'm saying you can age backwards. That's as ridiculous. And people saying, what? You can slow aging, you can't age backwards. That's crazy. And I'm saying, no, I see it all the time. We see people in better health. They look better. Their skin looks younger. Their gray hair turns back darker again. We measure people's telomere age, and we see that after they change to a ideal Nutritarian diet, their telomeres, which showed their biological age, was 10 years older than their chronological age. And there's this 50-year-old, 60-year-old telomeres. And now after 3 months of dietary change, their telomeres are back to a 60-year-old and back to a 50-year-old, not a 60-year-old. And after a year of dietary change, their telomeres are down to a 40-year-old when their chronological age is 60. We watch people resist aging and build up those anti-aging proteins like SIRT1 and AMP kinase, which slow the aging process and stabilize telomere, increase stem cell longevity and maintenance, and prevent inflammation and all the factors that age us. And we're saying here that the wide exposure to hundreds, thousands of phytochemicals and different colorful plants, particularly G-bombs, right? G-bombs. Greens, beans, onions, mushrooms, berries and seeds, berries like wild blueberries and blackberries, those dark berries, those low sugar fruits. The seeds like flax, chia, hemp have all these lignans and beneficial compounds in them. We're saying that the broad spectrum, including onions and mushrooms in the diet, defines a Nutritarian diet with the wide exposure to phytochemical, not like a macrobiotic diet, eating mostly rice, or a potato-based diet, or a fruitarian diet, eating mostly fruit. We're looking for a diet with lots of vegetables with a wide variety of foods in it, expanding your exposure to phytochemicals, not narrowing it, regular exercise, and moderate caloric restriction to keep yourself slim and muscular and keep your weight stable at the most favorable weight as you age are the secret to slowing the aging process. Now, of course, mTOR is elevated as a protein that elevated with all invasive cancers, 100% of invasive cancers. And elevation of mTOR measured in the blood is linked to increased insulin resistance, diabetes, cancer, and turns on cancer-promoting genes. I should mention that SIRT1 and AMP turns off cancer-promoting genes, and the high intake of the isothiocyanates from green cruciferous vegetables shut down the expression of cancer-promoting genes. It's not genes that increase. The BRCA1 or the GSTP1 gene isn't the major factor increasing breast cancer in women with those genetic defects. It's their diet. Because an idealized diet, a real diet with high in green vegetables, high in phytochemicals, suppresses and prevents those dangerous genes from even being expressed or causing a problem. And obviously, animal protein drives up growth-promoting hormones like IGF-1, and excessive calories in general, like extra oil from excessive calories, extra sweets, extra high glycemic foods, which are so dangerous, putting sweeteners on our food. And we get acclimated to liking sweeteners and wanting sweeteners and wanting things sweeter. When you're off those sweetening agents, people say to me, why don't I just have stevia and xylitol and monk fruit and low-calorie sweeteners? Because you're perpetuating your desire to eat overly sweetened substances. Now, a strawberry doesn't taste that sweet to you. Lettuce doesn't have as much flavor and sweetness. Carrots aren't as sweet. Beets aren't. Natural foods no longer have great flavor because you're chronically exposing yourself to excessive concentrations of sweeteners. I'm saying you actually enjoy food more when you get all that junk out of your diet. And of course, and it's combination between the animal protein and the high glycemic carbohydrates put people at risk. And don't forget, fish is animal protein. And we dump 1,000 tons of plastic into the oceans every hour. Every hour, 1,000 tons of plastic. And microplastics have invaded our oceans and our fish supply. And even if a little bit of animal products wouldn't be harmful, a little bit of salamander, snake, oysters or fish or something like that, or frogs, worms. A little bit of animal products probably wouldn't be healthy on an overall healthy diet, but in today's society, it seems like you have to be very careful with that, because even the seals and the polar bears are polluted. What we're saying right now is there's an incredibly heightened amount of pollution, especially microplastic particles, in fish farmed and caught off the coastal regions of Western Europe and of United States, because we have so much plastic dumping in the ocean. So we're talking here about your diet, moving to a diet that's more vegetable-based, plant-based, and where we're eating a big salad every day, at least one large salad every day, that's the prescription, and using between 1.5 and 3 ounces of nuts and seeds based on caloric needs. Nuts and seeds becomes your major source of fat, not oil. And don't forget, and of course, beans are a major source of carbohydrates, especially if people have a metabolic hindrance to weight loss and they're overweight or have diabetes, because beans have the most resistant starch and the most slowly digestible carbohydrates and are most glycemically favorable. And we want to have cooked greens every day. And of course, foods that are either frozen and defrosted or blanched or cooked in a wok. We want to use water-based cooking methods, so we're not blackening and darkening foods. And we're eating mushrooms and onions, mushrooms cooked, onions both cooked and raw every day, and some fresh fruits every day, particularly, and eating, of course, the lower sugar fruits and the foods with the high polyphenols, especially the darker things regularly, like wild blueberries and blackberries and other types of low sugar fruits, pomegranates, dark cherries, all types of delicious fruits. So one of the most, we could say, significant findings of the last decade is that, which is now reproducible in many studies, of course, that is that people with a lower carbohydrate intake, eating diets that are more animal product heavy, like paleo diets or keto diets, have the most early death. So even though a person may be controlling their weight or having their glucose temporarily look better on a more, higher animal product, higher protein diet, we know that low carbohydrates diet are linked to early death, and more animal protein leads to more premature death. And there's no such thing as a diet rich in animal protein that's going to be lifespan favorable. This has been well established to be be pretty well accepted, with large studies following people for decades, looking at deaths, that more animal protein means more death and more plant protein means longer lifespan. Let me say that one more time, so important for a plant-based community to understand this. And that is, these studies are showing and corroborating each other, and showing that more plant protein in the diet, more broccoli, right, more nuts and seeds, more beans, more soybeans, more hemp seeds, more high protein plant foods lead to longer life, and more lower protein plant diets with more, let's say, potato or rice or fruit leads to shorter lifespan. So one of the most consistent and important findings is that we lose protein bioavailability and digestibility as we age, and that moving to a plant-based or even a vegan diet, a totally vegan diet, the idea that we don't have to worry about protein and any combination of food gives us enough protein is not correct. And that vegan diets that pay attention to protein, where a person is eating seeds, nuts, beans, and greens to maintain protein adequacy with aging, definitively leads to longer lifespan than a diet higher in, let's say, carbohydrates or rice. And of course, brown rice is contaminated with arsenic. The Adventist Health Study 2 is such an important study, which showed the same thing. It showed that more animal protein made for more death and more plant protein made for longer life. But the Adventist Health Study 2 is so important in the history of scientific studies, is because they're studying a population that don't largely drink alcohol or eat a lot of junk food, or that are not generally obese. They're looking at a relatively healthier population compared to the average American, with a wide variety of intake, from vegan to flexitarian to pescatarian to those eating more conventional amounts of animal product. So they're able to really zone in and see the patterns of disease. If you study just the average American or Western European, too many people are eating alike, and there's not enough people in the categories comparatively of people eating more vegan or more small amounts of plants. The Adventist Health Study 2, because it's ongoing for decades and so many people in the cohort, and looking at hard endpoints like actual death and cardiovascular death and cancer death, is such an important study, which consistently shows this pattern of more plant protein, especially with bean and green intake, leading to longer life, and even smaller amounts of animal protein, shortening lifespan, even in lower amounts, and also that more nuts and seeds in the diet lead for longer life, and reducing nuts and seeds and moving to a lower fat plant-based diet by excluding nuts and seeds leads to almost a 40% increase in cardiovascular death. Dramatic increased death rate from both all-cause mortality, from both cancer and heart disease. We know you need fat in a vegetable-based meal to maximize the absorption of phytochemicals, and fat stabilizes the heart against arrhythmia. And the idea that a low-fat diet is some people actually say in the plant-based community, they say a low-fat plant-based diet, as if of some benefit. They've been falsely educated, misinformed to think that a diet lower in fat is somewhere favorable, when it's not true, because the 7-Day Adventist Health Study 2 divided fat intake and nuts and seeds intake into 5 different quintiles, and the lowest quintile of nut and seed consumption has much more death than the highest quintile of nut and seed consumption, which is usually about 1.5 ounces a day or more. So we're talking here about even an ounce a day was not in the highest quintile of nut and seed consumption. So even an ounce a day is somewhat low. So as we moderate calories, we don't want to moderate calories by taking all the nuts and seeds out of our diet. We want to moderate calories by taking the oil out of our diet, so we have room in our caloric pie to include nuts and seeds as a major source of fat. Every nutritional scientist in the world knows that walnuts is healthier than walnut oil, and sesame seeds are healthier than sesame oil. Why would be people being so confused about putting oil on their food? And you can't put the oil on the nuts and seeds, because then you're going to exceed your caloric intake. So what I'm saying here is that the data in the Adventist Health Study 2 has been corroborated by not 1 study or 5 studies or 10 studies, but 15. How many studies do you need to corroborate these long-term studies, when all these scientists devoting their lives to this data, and people look at all this data and they still are in denial that it's real, because they see their nutritional guru and their nutritional viewpoints as a kind of religion that they can't, that's fixated based on what they want to believe, and they're not flexible to let the science dictate and direct them to what's the healthiest way to live for longevity. So we should be eating more high protein plants. We're talking here lentils, beans, and soybeans in the form of edamame or dried soybeans you make into chilies and soups and things. Incorporating plant foods that are high in protein are an important part, especially to maximize human health and longevity, especially as we're reducing animal products in the diet to favorable levels, or even eliminating them completely, because obviously better for the environment, but also because so much pollution, even if you're having small amounts. So we're talking here about using hemp seeds and broccoli and other green vegetables and seeds and nuts, because when we do that and we incorporate these foods in our diet, we get more protein adequacy. So remember, breakfast is somewhat lighter, where we have maybe some grain like quinoa or steel cut oat, organic, of course, and we put those, flax, chia, hemp with berries, or maybe some plant milk. Maybe you have a glass of vegetable juice. Maybe you're having some fruit with breakfast. Maybe you're having a green smoothie. Maybe you're having some intact sprouted bread with berries or with a glass of juice. Whatever your breakfast is relatively light. We're trying to get hungry in time for lunch, because I want to emphasize lunch is the most important meal of the day. Because I want people to eat a large salad, not a salad in like a 7-inch soup bowl, but like a 9-inch bowl, like a bigger serving bowl, larger than a normal soup bowl. A lot of times, I recommend chopping the salad up with like a salad chopper and put in the onion and the scallion, tomatoes and the greens, but always include something green cruciferous, like arugula or baby kale or bok choy, or some kind of watercress, or maybe broccoli sprouts or some. In other words, include the cruciferous family. Recognize that lunch is the most lifespan promoting meal of the day. It's the meal where you're going to spend your time chewing that salad and liquefying every mouthful in your mouth, because you break open those cells with your teeth. And the more you liquefy and break open those cells, the more you cause the chemical reaction to occur in the mouth, where you're forming the beneficial compounds. Remember, myrosinase is the key enzyme in green cruciferous that's heat sensitive, that you lose when you cook your broccoli and your kale to a large degree. And we want to eat some arugula, watercress, baby kale, bok choy. And I'm such a bok choy nut. I love bok choy because it grows in the garden so beautifully. It doesn't attract aphids and bugs like cabbage does or kale does. We have to clean it as much, or even broccoli. It's so easy to grow. It's so bug resistant. It's so beautiful. And you can eat it in salads raw. You can juice it. You can put it into cooked vegetable dishes in a wok with mushrooms and water chestnuts and bamboo shoots and mushrooms and onions. And you can put the bok choy in there. Works better than cabbage. You can wok it with a great Thai sauce with lemongrass. And, in other words, there's so many great things you can do with bok choy. You can eat it in so many different ways, raw and cooked. And it grows so easily in your garden. You got crazy not to. And anyway, so I'm just a bok choy nut advocating people grow bok choy in their gardens. And then you have this big salad for lunch. And then you have a dressing because you absorb 20 to 50 times as much phytochemicals when you have some nuts and seeds or some fat with that meal, which then enhances human lifespan radically. Radical enhancement of human lifespan, or you could see radical inhibition of human lifespan by trying to cut the fat out of your diet and not eat seeds and nuts. So you're utilizing a dressing, maybe with some walnuts and sesame seeds. One of my favorite dressings is I take a peeled navel orange, the orange sesame dressing, and I blend it with some blood orange vinegar and a little bit of cashews and sesame seeds, unhulled sesame seeds. Then I'll take some of those sesame seeds and I'll toast them very lightly in a pan. And I'll put some in with the dressing mixed in there, but I'll take some and sprinkle some on my salad. Maybe I'll put some kiwis or strawberries on the salad or pomegranate arels on the salad too, and I'll make this delicious dressing. But you see, I'm utilizing the seeds and nuts with vinegar and other substances. Maybe tomato sauce with almonds and hemp seeds, with black fig vinegar and a fig, or what I'm saying is I'm using vinegar and nuts and seeds, not oil and vinegar, but vinegar and nuts and seeds to make these creamy, delicious dressings. And we allocate, about here at my retreat in San Diego, where overweight people come to get healthy and lose weight, we give them about a half an ounce of nuts and seeds in the dressing at lunch they pour on their salad, and a dip about half an ounce of nuts and seeds, either a sauce on their dinner vegetables, or they're using their raw carrots and raw bok choy or raw pepper slices and raw carrot sticks, whatever, and snow pea pods. They're having those raw vegetables with a dip before their cooked vegetable meal at night. And usually they're having a little bit of seeds in the morning. So they probably have between 1 1/4 and 1.5 ounces a day of nuts and seeds, even that they're overweight trying to lose weight. We don't take all the fat out of their diet, and the average person loses about 20 pounds of fat the first month and about 15 pounds the second month and 10 pounds each month thereafter. They're losing 50 pounds of body weight in the 3 months they're here. They're losing tons of weight. The way to lose weight is not to suck all the nuts and seeds out. Of course, we're not snacking on them, using it as an integral part of the meal. And then lunch may also include vegetable bean soup, where you have mushrooms and beans cooked in the soup, because you want to eat beans very well cooked and soft to maximize the digestibility and health-giving properties of the beans for maximum absorption of all those polyphenols and incredibly inositol pentachus phosphate. What I'm saying here is that we're enhancing the consumption and utilization of vegetables raw in the salad and using the beans and mushrooms cooked in the soup. So we have that together in this meal, this hearty meal. We have a big salad, a bowl of soup, and some fruit for dessert, which is lunch, your most important meal of the day. So dinner is earlier and a lighter meal where we're using raw vegetables to start, like I mentioned, carrot sticks and peppers. I don't have really enough appetite after having all the salad with the tomatoes maybe some cooked mushrooms in the salad, but maybe a little avocado, maybe a dressing or a dip, but maybe they have my salad. I had, chopped bok choy or chopped cabbage, or maybe I had arugula with lettuces. But I really want to eat that big salad, and I can't have enough leftover appetite to eat a lot of carrot sticks and raw jicama and raw beets and snow pea pods and other raw solid vegetables and raw peppers. So I save those raw vegetables to dinner time. So I have raw vegetables to start out. So I have 2 servings of raw vegetables, the salad for lunch, and I start dinner with raw vegetables too, with a little dip. And then I have a cooked vegetable dish with dinner. My wok drink, always something with a lot of greens and asparagus, string beans, cooked broccoli, cooked bok choy, cabbages. And I love growing asparagus. If you've got the access to a garden, growing asparagus is the most fun thing in the world, because you set up your asparagus patch and it grows every year. You don't have to replant it. It keeps growing every year, and it comes up. It's amazing. You cut down asparagus for tonight's dinner off the asparagus patch and you go steam it for 8 minutes. Most delicious fresh asparagus cooked that same day. And then the next day you come out there and there's a whole new asparagus popped up in the patch and you cut them down. It's just totally amazing that in one day the asparagus can grow 8 to 10 inches, and you can keep picking asparagus from your garden almost every day, for like months and months straight, once you set up your garden with this asparagus bed. So yes, bok choy, asparagus, and of course, you're having this mixed vegetable dish with mushrooms and onion in it. You can have, frozen green vegetables like frozen broccoli florets. You don't have time to cook, and you could have some dessert with frozen fruit. But remember, dinner is light. Calories at dinner count twice. If you're overweight looking to lose weight, keep your calories low at dinner, because the calories you consume at dinner make it harder to lose weight compared to the calories you consumed earlier in the day. Don't forget, lunch is your main meal of the day. And if you're looking to lose weight, we're filling up on these high volume foods like raw vegetables, including raw beets and carrots, which are high in fiber and make you feel satiated, and the calories are not as absorbable as cooked beets and cooked carrots are. So raw makes you lose weight more. And then, of course, fresh fruits, especially lower sugar fresh fruits, including citrus fruit and apples and kiwis and berries. Be careful with grapefruits. I do not recommend people consume grapefruits every day, especially in the summertime or warmer weather, because grapefruits can sensitize the skin to sun damage. In other words, they make it more likely to get skin cancer because the compounds in grapefruits can make your skin more sensitive to sun damage. So only eat grapefruits occasionally, or in the wintertime, or when you're not out in the sun, and don't make that the major source of your citrus fruit. And then, of course, cooked green vegetable. I'm saying Brussels sprouts, string beans, artichokes, asparagus, broccoli. My most favorite food in the world is artichokes. I love artichoke hearts, even with nothing on them, they're great. And then use the non-green vegetables that are so low in calories, like mushrooms, eggplant, tomatoes, peppers, onions, and cauliflower, to fill in if you're overweight, so you're eating enough bulk, so you're not tempted to eat more calories. So the most powerful weight loss secrets, because I don't know about you guys listening, because maybe you're not a traditional audience, but keep in mind that most of the audiences I speak to, and most people in America, are overweight and still have too much fat on their body. So then we want to make them eat only at meal times, eat more fat loss promoting foods like I just mentioned, the fat loss promoting foods, the raw vegetables, the cooked greens, and the non-starchy vegetables that promote fat loss like tomatoes, eggplant, peppers, onions, and mushrooms, which have powerful anti-fat storage, anti-angiogenic effects. They say, no way, Jose, I'm not letting you put fat on your body. And then eat legumes like lentils and black beans and azuki beans as your primary carbohydrate source. So eating less quinoa, less potato, of course, more spaghetti squash, more lower, some winter squash. All these things are fine with people with high caloric needs, but as you're modulating your calories lower, eat beans as your primary carbohydrate source, especially if you're more overweight or more prone to diabetes. Beans are a lower carbohydrate food. So don't forget, we can score foods on a hierarchical scale of quality, and beans have the most slowly digestible starches, and they're also richer in protein and very lifespan promoting. And we're saying here that the fiber and resistant starch in beans has a strong effect on modulating the apostat in the hypothalamus, and of course fuels the growth of favorable microbiome, producing more of those beneficial short-chain fatty acids that butyrate, and butyrate controls your appetite to a degree. So more beans and more in your diet is a dramatic effect on lowering your appetite effectively too. And of course, they're low glycemic and prevent the release of insulin. So going back to the importance of eating nuts and seeds for a minute, I want a third to a half of your nut and seed intake to come from the high omega-3 nuts like hemp seeds, flax seeds, chia seeds, and walnuts. Walnuts, the king of all nuts, because it's so high in omega-3. So it's not that you can't eat pistachios and pecans and cashews and things like that. It's just that they should not be the major source of your nut or seed intake. If I'm putting a dressing or a dip or a recipe that calls for cashews, I'm going to remove half the cashews and put half hemp seeds in with the cashews. So hemp seeds are so benignly flavored, you can put more hemp seeds in to increase the omega-3 ratio of any dressing or dip or sauce just by substituting more hemp and walnuts in place. I'm going to make a banana ice cream. I'm going to take that frozen banana and whip it up with real vanilla bean powder and a little bit of hemp and walnut to give it that creamy mouthfeel. So if I want to put some macadamia nuts in, I'll put just a little bit of macadamia nuts with some hemp or walnut, with some hemp seeds in, and I'll make this incredibly delicious banana ice cream for dessert. And then I'm utilizing those higher protein nuts and seeds like hemp. Notice hemp seeds fits the category of both high omega and high protein. Sunflower seeds, pine nuts, especially when we're dealing with a lot of athletes, sometimes with the elderly. Paying attention to protein adequacy is important from individual to individual, because some individuals require more protein and some of the elderly even require more creatine, lest they have more muscle wasting or muscle cramping. So it was important to be monitoring people to make sure they achieve nutrient adequacy. Okay, so we're on this diet, eating lots of vegetables and lots of salads. And then we want to be able to make salad dressings and spreads that make vegetables taste good. I'm running off to travel or a plane. I might use a cauliflower wrap or a Ezekiel wrap or something, and I put in there, roasted peppers or avocado or roasted or cooked mushrooms in my wrap with sprouts and tomatoes and whatever, and maybe I'll put a pesto sauce on that, or I'll marinara. Maybe I'll take my garlic nutter spread, which I'll take by always keeping a lot of roasted garlic along. So I'll take the whole head of garlic. Don't buy the garlic that already has the paper off it with little cloves. Take it with the whole head with the paper on, because then when you cook it, it keeps the nutrients and moisture in better. So I'm saying roast the garlic, at about 300 degrees for 30 minutes or 325 for 25 minutes. In other words, roast your garlic in the oven until it gets soft, but keep the paper on. And then when the paper's off, you can take your serrated knife and cut the edge off, which has the root, and you can squeeze it and pop all the garlic out, popping out, and you can take the roasted garlic out, because the roasting garlic is the secret to make foods taste great. And then I take that roasted garlic and mix in with maybe some hemp seeds or cashews and make a garlic nutter. Maybe put some nutritional yeast in there. Make a great flavored dip. But now I can turn that garlic nutter spread into a host of different dressings, right? I can put some basil and a little bit of lemon in there and turn it into a pesto sauce for the wrap I made for the plane. Or I can put some tomato sauce in there and a little bit of, fig or balsamic in there and turn it into a marinara dressing. Or I can put a little bit of mustard in there, or a little, basil vinegar, or what's it called? Lemon basil vinegar, a little balsamic vinegar, a little mustard in there, and make it into a garlic Dijon. I can turn that dressing into a million different dressings. And I mentioned the orange sesame dressing there already, that I traditionally use where I take the sesame seeds and toast them very lightly, and half of them I put on the salad and half I blend in with the cashews and the oranges and blood orange vinegar and a squeeze of lemon to make a delicious fruity dressing. Or I take just a tomato-based dressing based with tomato sauce. A lot of times I like to make my own tomato sauce, because tomato sauce you buy in the store is too watery and has no flavor. I usually take some unsalted sun-dried tomatoes and buy a low-sodium tomato sauce and plop the sun-dried tomatoes into the tomato sauce to thicken it. Or I'll take the tomato sauce and I'll put it on the stove on a low flame and cook some of the water out of it to thicken it. But best of all is growing my own tomatoes. tons of tomatoes and saving them frozen in the freezer, huge amounts of tomatoes, growing as many tomato plants as you possibly can take care of. And then having lots of extra tomatoes, you can make your own sauce with garlic and onion in there and little basil, but really cooking it down in the slowest flame possible and cooking it all day long for like 10 hours to make a sauce that's much more flavorful and thicker than you could make. And of course, I'm using the skin and the seeds of the tomatoes. Some I'm coarsely grinding, but some I'm grinding more finely to break all the seeds and skin down. Not like an Italian tomato sauce where they throw the seeds away and they throw the skin away. We want to use the seeds and the skin in our tomato sauce, but you make a lot of this homemade tomato sauce. It's nice and thick. It's great for making salad dressings. And you mix some nuts or seeds in with it, a little black fig vinegar, maybe a drop of organic raisin in there, and you make an incredibly delicious tomato sauce. And of course, ginger almond is a popular salad dressing. Walnut balsamic or almond balsamic is a popular dressing where people use roasted garlic, a little balsamic vinegar, and almonds with a touch of raisin. When you're using balsamic, it's such a bitter vinegar that using a little drop of raisin in there helps make it taste better. If I'm using a chili dish, with a chili, I'm not going to put raisins in there. I'm going to use organic currants because raisins are too big. And you'll sometimes get one on your spoon and sometimes you won't. Currants are more expensive than the raisins, but if I'm using a chili or a vegetable dish where I'm putting some fruit in the vegetable dish or some sweetener to it, I'll use a natural currant because it's smaller and disperses that kind of sweet flavor throughout the dish much better. And of course, there's a blueberry pomegranate dressing or blueberry dressing with nuts and blueberry vinegar and some frozen blueberries is really great. You can make a mango dressing. You can make a strawberry dressing, all types of delicious types of salad dressings. And you can make dips at night, which are low in calorie, like a salsa dip, salsa is usually made with peppers and tomatoes. Like I said, I'll put a little bit of currants in the salsa. Whenever I'm using more spice, like oregano or chili powder to make just a touch of spice in that bean salsa, and chopping or blending a little bit of kidney bean or azuki bean in there with tomato paste. Of course, the secret ingredient is the currants, not the raisins. And the most important ingredient is the scallion. Don't forget the incredible power that scallions have to prevent cancer. And tomatoes in general, cooked tomato products, are very powerful anti-cancer effects. So the fact that you're making a tomato-based dip at night with some kind of little bit of spice, and we don't want to heavily spice things because heavily spicing things can deaden your taste buds and make you no longer appreciate more subtle flavors. We want to only very lightly spice things. And then, of course, to make hummus. And when you're making a hummus using chickpeas and sesame seeds, we want to use some baked eggplant in there to dilute the nutritional density to make a lighter hummus. You can eat it more liberally, so it's not so calorically rich. So again, the secret is roasted garlic, using lots of roasted garlic in the hummus with baked eggplant, which you baked in the oven at 325 for like 35 minutes. And then you took, or 45 minutes, and then you took the skin off the eggplant. Because we don't want to eat, if it's been baked in the oven, we don't want to eat anything darkened that has skin on it. You can use the skin of the eggplant when you're making stews and soups, because you cook water-based cooking, you're not burning it. But once you're baking it in the oven, you take the skin away. So scoop out the center of the eggplant, mix it in with your chickpeas and your sesame seeds, your roasted garlic, a little secret ingredient, some fresh horseradish, with a little bit of lemon, makes it a really delicious hummus for your dip at night with the vegetables. And this Caesar dressing always gets the great rating on the website. You don't have to use all these different ingredients, of course. You could use some of these ingredients, but of course, remember, when we're putting in cashews, I'm going to put cashews and hemp seeds, not just plain cashews, some tofu in there, and a little bit of low sodium miso, a little bit of raw garlic, but lots of roasted garlic, a little mustard, a little date to sweeten it, and a little bit of kelp to give it that little seafood type flavor, and a little nutritional yeasting lemon juice. People love this dressing. We serve this at the retreat a lot too, where people love the Caesar dressing. And we, of course, aliquot it out so people know exactly the amount of calories they're getting for each serving. And we use a salad dressing little bowl that holds your salad dressing. And so if you're making salad dressing in a Vitamix blender at home, you got to know exactly the amount of nuts you put in it, so you make sure you know exactly how much to measure out for each day's use. And a lot of people like make some dressing or dip on a Wednesday, and they'll use that same dressing Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and maybe they'll Saturday make another dressing, use that Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. So in other words, we usually making enough, and we're not cooking every night, eating leftovers for a few nights. But it's worth it to make these great tasting dressings. And like I said earlier, artichokes taste so good and are so wholesome. They're high in protein, right? And they're only 25 calories for a whole artichoke, and they're so high in protein and so filling. You can eat, eat four. I'll eat two artichokes, 2 whole artichokes, 4 artichoke halves, a whole artichoke. I'll take, you touch the very bottom of the stem and the very top of the thorns off, and I'll cut the artichoke in half with a heavy knife, as you can see, exposing the choke and the heart. Cleaning the stem off, so it's nice and smooth, and then taking a small knife, a small sharp knife, and cutting along the demarcation line between the choke and the heart. You see that moon-shaped line cutting deeply, removing those like fuzzy, inedible, plastic-like leaves and fuzz in the choke. So I'll cut the artichoke in half, take the choke out, and the little purple inedible leaves in the center come out, and throw it away. And now I can steam that artichoke in boiling, get the water boiling, and then steam it above the boiling water for 18 minutes is usually sufficient, or 20 minutes in a higher altitude. So the petals pull off the choke easily. If you're going to pull off the outer petal, it would come off the choke. And you eat the whole inner side of the whole small petals are edible, and the whole choke and heart and stem are edible. And it's a food that should be a regular part of your diet. I'll even buy frozen artichoke hearts and take them in a bag on it when I'm traveling. But I love artichokes and eat a lot of fresh artichokes. So reviewing here, we're trying to use these G-bombs in our diet almost every day. We can throw a dart at any of these foods and describe its magnificent anti-cancer longevity benefits. But cruciferous vegetables are the utilization of cruciferous vegetables regularly, both raw and cooked, is another hallmark of what makes a nutritarian diet unique, because of the strong relationship between the anti-cancer effects and the longevity-promoting effects of cruciferous vegetables on lifespan, and promoting us to our achievement to live to be 100 years old. The highest quintile of cruciferous vegetable intake has the longest lived people. And cruciferous vegetables, remember, have that cell membrane with that myrosinase in the membrane of the cell, that then when you're chewing it, you're breaking open those little packets of myrosinase, mixing it with the glycinolates, forming the isothiocyanates in your mouth. And the better you chew, and leave here with the message that you have to liquefy your salad when you chew it, and that make sure you liquefy every mouthful. And now we're going on to making a soup, and I'm going to discuss how to make this anti-cancer soup, because if you can make this soup, you can use the same methodology to understand the principles to make other soups. The point is, we're learning that the myrosinase enzyme is heat sensitive. So when I'm adding it to the soup, I want to take my bok choy or my broccoli rabe or my mustard greens or my collard greens, whatever greens I choose, usually not kale, because my kids and family are eating so much kale otherwise that I would like to pick a different type of cruciferous green to utilize in the soup, because it's not going to notice the flavor of it that much anyway. So the secret here, what makes it this anti-cancer soup, and makes you understand how I want you to cook it, is I want you to take the green vegetable and I want you to blend it down into the blender while it's still raw. So you're breaking open those compounds so the myrosinase is intact and forms the ITCs in the blender. And then you can pour it into the soup to cook. So let me review. The first thing you did is you soaked your beans overnight. Then you put 2 quarts of water in a soup bowl. And it's in a big pot, 2 quarts of water in, and put your beans up to cook. Take your split peas and you put them in a separate pot, not in the same pot with the beans. Maybe put your cup of split peas and 2 or 3 cups of water into a separate pot to cook, because they're going to cook quicker than the beans. You're going to cover the beans and let them simmer now slowly. Of course, you soak them overnight. You rinse them off and you put fresh water in the pot. You didn't use the soaking water from overnight to put in the pot. You use new water in the pot when you're cooking your beans in a low flame. And now I have my peas cooking in a separate pot. And then once I get that cooking, now I can take my 5-pound bag of carrots and juice my celery and my carrots to make my stock. And I can take maybe a couple of quarts of vegetable stock made with carrot juice and celery juice and pour that into the pot now to cook. And now I'll take the juicer and clean it and put it away. And now I'll take my Vitamix blender out and I'll take my green cruciferous, the bok choy, the collard greens, the broccoli rabe, the mustard greens, whatever cabbage, whatever green you're going to choose in your soup. You're going to put that, ladle a little of the liquid that's cooking in the soup in there. Not too much, don't make it too watery, just to make this puree of greens so we can let the chemical reaction that forms the isothiocyanates form in the blender. And then I can take this green puree and pour that into the base of the soup. Leave my blender dirty now and take my leek or my onion. Don't forget you cut the root and the 1 inch of the top off the leek and cut the root off the leek, and now cut it down the middle, the whole length of the leek, so you can unravel it to take the dirt or the sand that settles into the deeper leaves and clean it out. Now I can cut the leek in half or a third with the onion. I can fit that in my Vitamix blender and lay a little soup liquid in there, because remember, the onion and leeks have that alliinase enzyme. You don't want to cook the onion or the leek first. You want to blend it while it's still raw. Don't forget, once you form the organosulfide compounds, once you form the isothiocyanates from the green cruciferous vegetables, they're heat stable in the soup. The soup would have prevented their formation because you would have deactivated the enzymes before the chemical reaction took place. But once you get the chemical reaction that takes place in the blender, that makes it this anti-cancer soup, because we're maintaining the viability and the formation of the anti-cancer compounds. So now you hit the onion, and you formed sulfenic acid and made your eyes burn and tear. Keep the blender away from you and make it smooth and pureed. Now pour that into the soup to cook. And now by this point, your peas are softened enough. The split peas cooking in a separate pot. You don't have to clean the blender. Just pour your split peas and the water that the split peas are cooking on into the blender, and add a little bit of nuts in there, a little bit of cashews and hemp seeds to add a little creaminess and the mouthfeel, to add a delicious flavor to the soup. And let that blend down into a puree in the blender, and let that smooth and creamy, and then pour that into the soup. So the beans are staying lumpy in the soup. Now you can start to add the mushrooms, your chopped mushrooms, and I recommend people use shiitake mushrooms. Cut off the little dirt nib on the stem, but use the whole stem and the whole cap using your shiitake mushroom and one other mushroom. You want to use 2 types of mushrooms, shiitake and one other, shiitake and oyster, shiitake and trumpet, shiitake and white button, shiitake and lion's mane, shiitake and so in other words, pick your shiitake mushrooms with that chewy mouthfeel and pick some other mushrooms for the anti-cancer variety, right? And then you chop them up small and add that to your soup and cover your pot. And then you can add a little bit of nutritional yeast or veggie zest, your plant seasonings. You don't want to use too much. If you're using something like Mrs. Dash, which has pepper in it, you don't want to use too much pepper. There's so many competing delicious flavors in this soup. You don't want to make it too peppery or spicy. You make just enough Mrs. Dash so there's a hint of barely detectable pepper, because you want that full different symphony orchestra of different flavors playing in your mouth. And then you're by this point, it took you about an hour to make the soup, but you need to cook it for another hour on a low flame so the beans get very soft. You want your soup to cook for a full 2 hours. You want the beans to be under low boiling heat on a low boil on a low flame for a full 2 hours to get maximally soft. Then you can eat that dinner from that soup and take this giant pot of soup you just made, and I clean out a shelf in my refrigerator, put a dish towel then on the shelf. I put the warm bowl of soup in the refrigerator, close it up, and the next day, all the leftover soup that's now cold, I now can take out of the soup refrigerator, and I can aliquot it out into various containers for the week, even plastic containers. I didn't want to put hot soup into plastic, but I can put, now that it's cold, I can put it into my plastic containers to take it so people can take it to work with them. Or you can just put it in glass containers Or you can put it in individual containers that you freeze, or you can usually, we don't really freeze much of it because people eat it in the next 3 or 4 days. You know, it's always gone. It's never like more than 3 or 4 days. It's gone because it's so delicious. And I'm not saying to you that obviously that you can make different soups, one with more cabbage, one with more split peas, different types of squash soups, and all types of different soups, but you still understand this basic principle of how do you make the soup by the beans cooking in the water first. You're doing the juicing second, you blending the onion and the green into your soup, and then you add the mushroom. Okay, so glad you're getting a good understanding of that. And because we're having people eat a lot of beans, chilies are a great thing to use. Cooked tomatoes and peppers in with chilies are great things. I usually take that extra firm tofu and I freeze it in the freezer first, and I take it out of the freezer, and then when it thaws, crumble it, and it forms like a chopped meat like consistency where it's more rubbery, and you can mix it in with your rest of your ingredients. A little bit of chili powder. The secret ingredient is cinnamon, right? A little cinnamon in your chili. Don't make it that spicy. Add a little bit of those little currants to sweeten it. The currants do great with the beans, and a little bit of almond butter in there. So, or you use just garlic nutter, the garlic nutter you made that's sitting in your refrigerator that has the nuts and the roasted garlic in there. Or you could roast garlic and put a little almond butter in, or take a garlic nutter. But of course, making a great chili is an important part of a Nutritarian diet, and people love it. And then desserts. You know, most of our desserts we eat, and most of the desserts I eat are just like some frozen cherries. At the beginning of the meal, as I started eating my dinner, I took some frozen cherries, a frozen mango, or frozen jackfruit, or frozen, something good out of the or frozen mixed berries out of the freezer. So the time I get to the dinner part of the meal, it's like partially defrosted. It's not like you just took it out of the freezer and you're eating an ice cube fruit. It's not totally at room temperature either, so it makes it feel like you're eating ice cream. And then occasionally we'll have some kind of, fancier dessert like a black bean brownie. We mix some beans with some dates and almond butter and natural cocoa powder and chia seeds with an avocado icing, or making another delicious type of dessert. Sometimes we have a little bit of a carrot cake or a papaya type thing in there. All right, I'm going to stop the sharing of my screen. So now I went through most of the information I wanted to go through with you guys today. All right, I think I'll open the chat box and bring up back to our host here, who's hosting this today.
Hi, Dr. Fuhrman. It's Ben.
Q&A. Hey.
Hi there. So thank you. That was so comprehensive and informational for all of us. Thank you so much. Just wanted to do a little housekeeping. The way we do our Q&A here is we really don't answer anything directly from the chat box, but we have people raise their hands. And so me and the tech team will go ahead and we'll select the raised hands, and we will feed you everybody's question, and they'll ask you of it live. So let me make sure that everybody knows how to do that. I already see a number of raised hands, which is great. For those of you that don't know how to raise your hands, what you do is you click on your reactions tab in your Zoom tools, and you'll see a little emoji there. It says raise hand. You click that, and we will see the raised hands, and we will answer each one in the order that they come in. And we'll get to as many questions as we can. As you can all see, drfuhrman.com is a great place to find Dr. Fuhrman. And so with that, by the way, there are a few folks out there that might not have a reactions tab. If that's the case, you can probably find the raise hand function in your participants tab. With that, Dr. Fuhrman, if you're ready, I'll bring on our first question.
I'm all set. Looking forward to it.
Great. Thank you. And so our first question, and I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly. I'm not sure if it's Karen or Corinne, but you are up now. Our tech team has probably sent you a note to unmute yourself.
Hi, Dr. Fuhrman. I'm Karen calling from Mexico. Thank you very much for your great presentation. I love your G-bombs, but onions, garlic, and bell peppers make me terribly farting. Does that mean I should avoid these foods?
No, absolutely not. I see people that can't handle salads and they can't handle beans, and some people don't do well with onions, and people sometimes can't handle certain things. So what we do is we never take it out of the diet completely. We lower it gradually, titrating down to the spot where it's not too uncomfortable for them. so they can still tolerate it. And then over time, they're eating that smaller amount and they get used to it, and they usually can start to tolerate some more over time. And having gas is not something that's abnormal or bad, but it usually reflects not chewing food well enough when you're eating it. I know, people ask me ask the doctor forum at my drfuhrman.com, and they'll say, I'm seeing undigested food in my stool, and there's something wrong with my digestion. I'm saying, no, that's not something wrong with your digestion. You don't have teeth in your digestive tract, and you should be liquefying your food in your mouth so it's mixed with your saliva so well that it goes down as a liquid. So it's your job to liquefy your food with your teeth before you swallow it. And if you do that, you're better able to tolerate the things you think you can't tolerate as well, that you weren't chewing as well. But of course, if you don't handle beans, you use beans lesser and lesser amounts, so they're not that uncomfortable for you. But you don't take them out completely. If you're not good with onions or garlic, do a smaller amount, but don't take it out completely. Get to a point of relative comfort and then stick with that. And usually you can titrate to an amount that's reasonable. And then with time, you'll see you can probably increase some.
Thanks, Dr. Fuhrman. Up
Thank you
next,
for the question.
Yeah, thank you. We have Carolina up next.
Yes. Hi, Dr. Fuhrman. Thank you so much for all of your work. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about multiple sclerosis and foods that might be good for that condition, and particularly damage to the optic nerve. Are there any foods or nutrition excellence that could help regenerate or benefit that condition?
I've taken care of hundreds of patients with multiple sclerosis, most of which people have made complete recoveries from relapsing and remitting and from early stage multiple sclerosis. There's some degree of progressive multiple sclerosis that gets to a point of damage that becomes irreversible. But the idea that certain foods heal one part of the body or one disease and other foods hurt another disease or help another disease is not correct. An ideal immune supporting diet is basically best for all diseases. There's not one particular food that helps your nerves and another food helps your brain, helps your eyes, helps your heart, or helps your kidney. It's not the way the body works. I'm saying that a Nutritarian diet emphasizes a full portfolio of healing foods, and I've had tremendous success, consistent success, people recovering completely from multiple sclerosis if we can catch it before major and irreparable damage has taken place. Now, there are certain foods that can hurt, that are bad for people with certain autoimmune conditions that people should not eat. Like, we don't want to give nutritional yeast for a person with inflammatory bowel disease, especially Crohn's disease. It could make good things worse. We don't want to give alfalfa sprouts to a person with lupus. We don't want to so there are certain foods that may be non-favorable for certain diseases, but there's not particular one food that's going to be the cure for this particular disease. It's having the diet that's best adapted with the most nutrient richness. We're trying to increase the nutrient quality of the diet. And with people with some of these autoimmune conditions, I'm often adding 1 or 2 juices to their diet because they're invariably low in phytochemicals. It's why their immune system isn't functioning well. And by eating and chewing right is good, but it could take them too long to build up the nutrient density in their tissues for their immune system to normalize. So we accelerate the rate at which we get high tissue density of phytonutrients by using a juice of 1/3 cruciferous, 1/3 lettuce and celery, and 1/3 carrot and beet. And they have that glass of juice in addition to their salads and their green smoothies and their other vegetables they're eating to increase the rate at which we build up their nutrient levels. Because your appetite and the amount of calories you consume is only so much, and we don't want people to force in too much food. So adding the juice enables them to comfortably get more vegetables into their diet. So this person with autoimmune disease, we're also making sure their omega-3 index is above 5. And even people with certain types of heart disease or genetic predispositions with certain alleles or lipoproteins, we have to make sure their omega-3 index is above 5 to adequately prevent brain shrinkage and be best for their health and their heart. And the same thing is true with the autoimmune disease. So we modulate the supplement of the EPA and DHA and EPA, most often using a vegan supplement of EPA and DHA to make sure their omega-3 index is above 5. The studies show that as you go to 4 and 3 to 2, you get shrinkage of the brain with aging and cognitive impairment. And one of the most serious drawback of most people advising on plant-based and vegan diets is they're not careful enough with making sure people maintain an adequate omega-3 index with aging. That's one where blood tests is very valuable, because we know with multiple studies that corroborate each other, number one, we know that lower levels of omega-3 increases risk of both cancer and cardiovascular death. But the main issue, of course, is shrinkage of the brain and cognitive impairment with aging, with people with low levels of omega-3 index. And people absorb and convert omega-3 at different rates. So there's no one diet that's going to give everybody a one amount that people could say, oh, I'm doing this. I'm eating a lot of hemp seeds. I'm eating a lot of flax seeds. I'm eating a lot of walnuts. But that may work for you or may not. But in most cases, there's individual genetics that determine your need for how much supplement you need and whether you need supplementation or not. So it's very critical, especially with an autoimmune disease like multiple sclerosis, that you maintain an omega-3 index above 5 to maximize healing of nerves. Okay, thank you for the question. Let's go on to the next question.
Thanks, Dr. Fuhrman. Up next, we have NW. If you go ahead and unmute yourself, please. Hi.
Hi, Dr. Fuhrman. I take your probiotic blend, Flora-Biotech, and I'm wondering when it's best to take it, in the morning on an empty stomach or at night, and also for the Osteobiotech, taken 3 times a day with meals. If I only eat 2 meals a day, should I take the third dose with a few walnuts for better absorption?
Why don't you just take 2 a day? If you're taking see, we're saying here that it's not good to take high dose calcium, because high dose calcium can make calcifications in tissues, and it's not good. So we want women who are postmenopausal, who have osteopenia, or who need a little extra calcium, because calcium absorption goes down with aging. We give them a little extra K2 and calcium in a small amount, food-based calcium, and that's the Osteobiotech this person's talking about. But we want you to consume it like food as part of the meal. So if you're eating 2 meals a day, just take 2 a day. If you're eating 3 meals a day, I don't think it's necessary to take a third meal or eat walnuts just to get you were trying to duplicate the same effect if you had a higher your meal had a little more calcium in it. So I would just take the 2 with you if you're only eating 2 meals a day, and the days you eat 3 meals, take 3. And then as far as the probiotic, the probiotic is I don't routinely recommend people need to take probiotics unless they've had antibiotics or have digestive disturbances, a history of reflux, or irritable bowel syndrome, or chronic diarrhea. In other words, there's usually a reason for that. And then whether you take it with meals or how much you take is dependent on the reason you're taking it. So most people don't need to take a probiotic supplement, but those that do need one is better off taking the probiotic at the beginning point of each meal. So I would take it if you're eating 2 meals a day, 2 a day before the meal. But for example, I don't take a probiotic myself because I've been eating so healthfully for so many years, and I haven't taken an antibiotic in probably 20 years. I think about 10 years ago, I got Lyme disease from a tick. I thought it was like a scab behind my knee, and it was a tick, and I developed a bullseye, and I had to take antibiotics for 10 days for that. But I took probiotics for 6 months after that, but I haven't really taken probiotics since. I don't think the need to, because my diet is otherwise so perfected, you know what I mean? All right, thanks for the question.
Thanks, Doctor. Up next, we have Stephanie. Hi, Stephanie.
Hello, Dr. Fuhrman. Thank you so much for doing this. I gathered from your presentation that you are very anti-salt. So can you go into a little bit more of why? And then also, as someone who's experiencing heart issues because of dehydration, how do I balance that without salt?
Thanks for the question. Interesting. Yes, we know that studies show that salt eating leads to early cardiovascular death and high blood pressure and things like that. But what people don't recognize is that the chronic exposure to salt over a lifetime weakens the endothelial lining of the blood vessels, causing microvascular hemorrhaging. Over time, making the interior lining of the fragile vessels in the brain with a higher propensity to burst, causing a hemorrhagic stroke. What I'm saying is that salt eating increases stroke risk outside of its effect on raising blood pressure. So even if you don't have high blood pressure in response to salt, you're still aging your body and increasing risk of death, because you may not be aware that people in Asian populations or people with local populations with low cholesterol are at higher risk of hemorrhagic stroke and low risk of embolic or ischemic stroke, and that low cholesterol and plant-based diets are linked to higher risk of hemorrhagic stroke for people who eat salt. What I'm saying right now is salt eating is even more dangerous for a person on a plant-based diet trying to protect against cardiovascular, embolic, or ischemic death. It increases risk of hemorrhage, a bleed, not a clot. And atherosclerosis, and eating a diet that promotes high cholesterol and blockages and thickening of the vessels in your body has some protective effect on thickening the thinner blood vessels and fragile blood vessels in the brain. I'm saying atherosclerosis, burgers and pizza and bacon may lower your risk of hemorrhagic stroke as it increases your risk of ischemic stroke. And as we increase the risk of hemorrhagic stroke, because we have no atherosclerosis protecting our fragile vessels, it's more important not to eat salt. As you follow a Nutritarian diet with the sodium that's present in natural foods that all primates and humans consume for the millennium, then you don't need to force as much water. This idea that we're drinking 8 to 10 glasses of water a day makes people excrete excessive amounts of sodium, and you lose other minerals and nutrients with the extra water you're drinking and the extra sodium you're urinating out. So people become dehydrated from the excessive consumption of water that they didn't need. And drinking more water makes them more dehydrated because they can't hold on to intravascular volume, and their intravascular blood volume, blood sodium, gets too low from the excessive drinking of water. There are some individuals that require a small amount of sodium added to their diet because chronically they've developed a sodium losing kidney problem over time, and they require a regimented or measured amount of sodium, such as 300 to 500 milligrams of sodium extra a day, but that's very rare. Most people are going to live the longest and do the better with no added sodium. I allow people to have 200 to 300 milligrams of sodium added to their diet over and above what's in natural foods, which keeps their level for the day below 1,000. I particularly myself don't like that extra 200 or 300 because food tastes too salty to me, even with a little extra coconut aminos on them. Coconut aminos are not that high in sodium. A little bit here and there to flavor a dish is okay. But most of the stuff, if you use too much of that stuff, or even, I don't even like the taste of it. I can taste the salt because my taste buds have become so sensitive from not having salt, and they're so strengthened to the sensitivity to salt that foods taste saltier in general, and thing that has some added salt tastes too salty. So what I'm saying to you is that you eat a diet low in sodium, you drink the right amount of water based on your water needs, your climate, how much exercise you're doing. But in a moderate climate, when you're not sweating or outdoors in the heat or exercising, 2 to 3 glasses of water a day is sufficient. Don't drink 8 to 12 glasses of water a day because you can become dehydrated by over-drinking water, and that may be the cause of your relative hyponatremia or low body sodium. Also, when you switch from a higher sodium diet to a lower sodium diet, your kidneys and your sweat excretes a lot of sodium, and your urine excretes a lot of sodium. So people, when they switch from a high sodium intake to a low sodium intake, they're still urinating out and sweating out too much sodium, and they become relatively fatigued or low blood volume. But over a few weeks of time, as your kidney stops putting on excess sodium and your body homeodynamically becomes sensitive to a lower amount of sodium, holding on to sodium effectively, and you're not losing sodium in your sweat anymore, which means you're not going to get cramping and lose loss of electrolytes with heavy exercise or sweating in the heat. These athletes who are taking in Gatorade and electrolyte drinks, and they get cramps in their legs, and they begin there because they're losing sodium and other minerals like potassium and magnesium from sweat. But if you're used to eating a diet that's already an excellent diet without excessive amounts of sodium, then your sweat does not lose those minerals, and you don't need to sodium replenish or electrolyte replenish. So I hope that gives you a better understanding that relatively fatigued and lower blood sodium could happen temporarily as people switch to a low sodium diet. Just people go from a very low sodium diet to more sodium, they're going to feel dried out and feel more thirsty and feel more uncomfortable with sodium in their diet because their kidneys are not used to getting rid of sodium. So it's all based on what you're used to, but we want people to accommodate to and get used to lower levels of sodium to maximize lifespan and to prevent the risk of hemorrhagic stroke later in life. Okay, thanks for the question.
Thanks, Dr. Fuhrman. Up next, we have Yaron. Yaron, looking forward to your question.
Thank you for the great presentation, Doctor. A few days ago, Dr. Ezenstein in this conference recommended to avoid avocado and nuts to prevent heart disease. I would like to know what is your intake about this, and also what is your intake about raw tahini sauce? Would you recommend to use it as a sauce for a salad?
Roasted tahini sauce, did you say?
No, raw tahini sauce.
Raw tahini?
Raw tahini sauce, yeah, the ground sesame that they call it tahini.
Yeah, most tahinis are made with what are they called? Shelled sesame seeds, hulled sesame seeds. So just the white part. You're not making the tahini with the whole sesame seed. So I recommend you make your own by blending whole sesame seeds, the black or brown ones, and don't buy the commercial tahinis. But I have seen one, I think, available in the last decade. I've seen one tahini made with whole sesame seeds, but I don't really see it that commercially available. I don't even know if it's still able to buy. And as far as nuts and avocado with heart disease, I don't think there should be any more controversy or opinions being given about this, because I think that the evidence is irrefutable and definitive that taking nuts and seeds out of a diet increases risk of cardiovascular arrhythmia and cardiovascular death. There's been too many studies to demonstrate that already. How many studies does a person need to be convinced? 10 studies, 20 studies? How many thousands of deaths do you have to review before you're convinced that removing the fat out of a diet is not lifespan favorable and is not cardiovascular disease favorable? Now, that said, we all recognize that fat on the body is not favorable for your health and longevity. And you have to remove calories from your diet, and you can't overeat on nuts or eat too much avocado, and those foods have to be restricted to make sure your body fat gets low. But restricting any food so your body fat gets favorable is not the same thing as taking a whole category of foods out of the diet with some expectation that there's an added benefit from removing the calories from that category of food compared to removing calories from another category of food. We have to lower our calories to the adequate level. And I'm saying definitively that all the studies have looked at this show that lifespan, both all-cause mortality and particularly cardiovascular death, in the Physician's Health Study that looked at the type of cardiovascular death that a diet too low in fat seemed to exacerbate, was sudden cardiac death and the promotion of irregular heartbeats. So I'm saying that this idea that you're going to in some way lower your cholesterol or improve your cardiovascular health by removing the nuts or avocado from your diet is incorrect. There's no data to support that. And that I published a study in the International Journal of Disease Prevention and Recovery, was published about 3 months ago, listing all the data and studies documenting where that diets that include fat are more cardiovascular and lifespan favorable. And my career over the last 35 years, taking hundreds and hundreds of people with high blood pressure, heart disease, and other cardiovascular illnesses, and reversing their disease in every single case. Every person has been able to reverse their heart disease effectively and achieve freedom from cardiovascular, get their blood pressure back to normal, get their, I can't imagine. So with the proper way, and none of the diets, no diet is necessary to take all the nuts and seeds out of the diet. You don't get better efficacy or faster weight loss or any benefit whatsoever. There's no benefit to a diet lower in fat compared to one that's moderately higher in fat, assuming that the fat is coming from a healthy food like hemp seeds and walnuts. And I actually showed Dean Ornish a lot of that data when I wrote the book, The End of Heart Disease, and published it about 4 years ago, because I wrote in the book before I published it in the preliminary version that Dr. Ornish was recommending egg whites, but he wasn't recommending any walnuts. And I showed the data to suggest that this is contrary to the scientific literature. And Dr. Ornish changed his viewpoints, reviewed all the data, reviewed all the studies, and then at that point put some nuts and seeds back in the diet he recommends as well. So I do think that's a big mistake, but I also think a big mistake in nutritional advice that could potentially be harmful to people is not taking a DHA EPA supplement if they have cardiovascular disease, because when you move your diet to vegan, then regardless of how much omega-3 you eat or nuts and seeds you eat or don't eat, you still have a large section of the population. And we did a study that I was helped get started through the Nutritional Research Foundation, where we did more than 150 people, showing the majority of those people had omega-3 indexes below 4, and above 5 is what's ideal for cognitive and for maximizing brain function with aging. So this idea that vegans don't need to take omega-3 is also not beneficial, is advice that's too radical and not conservative enough. To be more conservative and to be more cautious in recognizing that a vegan diet, especially a low-fat vegan diet, has never been tested through the millenniums of human existence, that we have to be cautious and make sure we look at all the studies and see what's working the best and evaluate everything and not just pick the 1 or 2 things we like. And the data does suggest that if your omega-3 index gets low, your risk of brain shrinkage, it correlates with brain shrinkage. The level of omega-3 index correlates with how big your brain is later on in life, and to go around just believing that it's okay to have not to supplement that when you need to. So I'm suggesting it's important for people to either supplement or to take a blood test for their omega-3 index and know their number so they can supplement accordingly, or both. So all these things are important. And thanks for the question. Obviously, I don't think the advice you got there is ideal.
Thanks, Dr. Fuhrman. Up next, we have DF. DF, what's your question?
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Dr. Fuhrman. I love your GBOM suggestion. I have a question about fiber. What do you think of psyllium husk and chitin in insect? I believe chitin has probably just insoluble fiber, but psyllium husk may have both soluble and insoluble. But I'd like to know your thoughts on chitin and psyllium husk. Thank you.
Well, if you're eating a healthy diet that's nutritarian, you're getting such a huge amount of fiber in your diet. I don't know why you would need to supplement with any kind of fiber. There's some rare instances that people have some digestive impairments where psyllium or chitin can be useful. But for general population, I don't know why. I don't think it's something that should be even utilized by 1 in 1,000 people. I don't think there's a need for taking more fiber than otherwise is in a good diet. Thanks for the question, though.
Thanks, Doctor. Up next, we have Sophia. Hi, Sophia.
Hi, thank you so much, Doctor. My question is, speaking of irregular heartbeat, what helps with heart arrhythmia and also poor fat digestion? And is there a good source of DHA and EPA, or is it necessary to take a supplement? And if there is one, which one you recommend? Thank you.
Well, you talked about a heart arrhythmia, and heart arrhythmias have multiple causes. I can't really definitively tell you what causes yours or the person you're talking about, your neighbor, your family, your husband. I don't know what's causing that. Most heart arrhythmias are caused by cardiac ischemia or obstructions in the microvasculature that takes blood to the heart. But a lot of cardiac arrhythmias are caused by medications doctors give for blood pressure, which brings the diastolic too low because the coronary arteries refill during diastole. So the major cause of arrhythmias and atrial fibrillation are going to doctors to lower your blood pressure instead of eating to lower your blood pressure. I'm not saying a low diastolic is going to cause an arrhythmia when you're not medicated, but when you're medicated to a low diastolic, then the diastolic isn't set to the oxygenation needs of the heart, which can then cause an arrhythmia. So it's getting off the medications and eating right so your blood pressure comes back to normal so you don't need medications is the main issue. That doesn't mean there are other causes of rare causes of arrhythmia that could be looked into, but mostly those are the main causes. Some people could have an arrhythmia due to fatty acid imbalances or even a protein malabsorption. Maybe some people need more creatine because they can develop an arrhythmia due to creatine deficiencies, but some people need, so in other words, I can't answer that question without knowing the individual in more detail and studying their condition. But most cases it's medication is the problem. And I shouldn't be on all this blood pressure medication. They should be changing their diet. I do recommend people take a plant-based EPA and DHA, The one I sell at drfuhrman.com is unique because we keep it packed in dark glass and we have it shipped to us in refrigerated trucks. So a person is using a vegan product without a preservative in it because we keep it refrigerated. The reason I started making it or utilizing the manufacturer, taking it in glass, because when I was recommending so many of my patients, because I've involved with this from my youth, I was involved with my mentors in the natural hygiene movement, like Dr. Herbert Shelton, Virginia Vertrano, Kiki Sidwa, Alec Burton, all these people who I looked up to, who were promoting plant-based and vegan way of eating. Most of them developed dementia or Parkinson's or other neurologic deficits. And taking care of the community of vegans through my practice, so many of them developed neurologic disorders later in life that I looked more into checking blood tests and evaluating their omega-3 index and starting recommending people take omega-3 many decades ago. But people would complain of burping and indigestion, and we would analyze the pills, the fish oil pills, or the vegan omega-3 EPA and DHA that we give people had high TBA scores, and they were not fresh. And they had some degree of rancidity in them. So making sure you look at the date of manufacturing, and you don't swallow a pill, but you cut the pill open with a serrated knife, and so you can taste the liquid to make sure it's not going to taste like gasoline, is important. Then I started making my own because I wanted to be able to get it keep it fresh and refrigerated, and not put it into a capsule and have it in a dropper, so you could make sure you're tasting it, so you're not eating anything that's rotten. So yes, I recommend people take that DHA purity that I sell, but there are other brands available. You just have to make sure they're fresh. And not every person needs it, because some people are high converters and can make enough from the short chain omega-3 they're eating through the flax seeds, the walnuts. They can still I've seen some people get a level of 6 or 7, get an adequate level without using supplements. So, but unfortunately, you can't depend on that predictably, because even a person doing all the right things, their level still could be low, and they still should be, because most people don't have adequate levels. So I hope that answers your question. I have one available on my website that's made, that we pack in glass, that we keep refrigerated, and we want you to, obviously, when you get it shipped to you, if you're going to store a bunch for a while, keep it in the refrigerator. Or if you're buying a different brand, then make sure you read the date of manufacture if you're using a vegan brand, and try to get one as close to the date of manufacture, and then taste it by cutting open and taste it to make sure it doesn't have a rotten taste, that it tastes fresh.
Thanks, Doctor. Up next, we have Benny. Benny, what's your question for Dr. Fuhrman?
Hi, Dr. Fuhrman. If I want to be a hardcore healthy person, is raw vegan healthiest? And if not, what % raw versus cooked?
You know, that's a pretty difficult question too. I don't think raw vegan is the healthiest, because number one, mushrooms are safer to eat cooked, and beans have to be very well cooked to be safe and to be good for you. And to eliminate beans and mushrooms from the diet to maintain rawness is not lifespan, protein, or immune system favorable. I've been involved with this plant-based community for many, many decades, and I've seen a lot of raw food as they age. They can do well in their middle ages, but as they age, they're more likely to get too much fruit in their diet, and too many fruits and nuts. They're more likely to get fungal infections, nail infections. They don't get good muscle structure. So I just see no beneficial effect to making your diet all raw. And don't forget what I'm saying here, like the Women's Healthy Eating and Living Study, the WHEEL study, for example, it showed vegetables were most protective against cancer, but women who ate fruits and vegetables had more cancer protection than people who ate vegetables alone. I'm saying here in this presentation that, you know, these plant foods are super healthy, but taking the nuts and seeds and removing them and taking them out of the diet makes the diet less healthy. Taking the beans out of the diet makes the diet less healthy. Taking the mushrooms out of the diet makes the diet less healthy. The more inclusionary you can be, the wider your selection of plant foods, the better protein bioavailability balance and nutrient balance you have with aging. And so I don't need you to eat a lot of cooked foods, but I do think having, you know, at least one serving a day of cooked mushrooms, and why not have some cooked greens in your diet? Or there's just no advantage to being 100% raw. And of course, then you wind up, and then you're not getting the caloric bulk and satiation from the extra beans but in any case, I'm not recommending it. I'd recommend you still have some % cooked. So I'm saying that there's a wide spectrum of what would be okay. maybe 30-70, 30% cooked, 70% raw, or 70-30, 70%, 30% raw, or anywhere in between might be adjusted for an individual needs or differences among people. But I think some mixture of raw and cooked is usually the best.
Thank you, Dr. Fuhrman. We're going to hold it up there. That's all the time we have for in Q&A. And we're sorry we're not able to get to every question, but I have to say, and I know everybody feels the same, you've been incredibly gracious with your time today in answering the Q&A. Your presentation, of course, thorough and wonderful as always. So you've come back year after year. We so greatly appreciate that. In fact, speaking of coming back, in case you folks don't know, Dr. Fuhrman is going to be back tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern, along with his colleagues, Dr. Dale Bredesen, Dr. Kim Williams, and Dr. Joel Kahn, for a panel on how to dramatically reduce obesity, heart disease, cancer, diabetes, and Alzheimer's with diet and lifestyle. And so for that, Dr. Fuhrman, we look forward to seeing you back here at 7 p.m. Eastern, and we appreciate that. I'd love to thank you all day, but really, I think I'm not the only one. So I'm going to ask our tech team to go ahead and unmute everybody. What do you want to say, everyone, to Dr. Fuhrman?
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Dr. Fuhrman. That was amazing.
Thank you.
Always
Amazing.
amazing.
Always amazing.
Thank you so much.
Good.
For your work.
Love that.
Thank you.